Mr. President, esteemed administrator, distinguished guests, fellow colleagues, and most importantly, the reason why we're all here, students, welcome. It gives me great pleasure to introduce today's guest and speaker. Before going into that, I need to remark that we, Alfaisal and Boeing, go a long way back. Boeing, as a matter of fact, is one of the founding members of the university. And since the inception of the university, we've had a very encouraging and strong relationship with that, and we consider them a great partner to the progress of this university. And before presenting today's speaker, I'd like to recognize the members of the visitors, Engineer Anis, Engineer Majid Harbi from Boeing Middle East, based here in Riyadh. I'd also like to recognize Juan Carlos Campo, who is from Boeing Research and Development. He is the Boeing Research and Development in Middle East. He's based in Dubai. Prior to being with Boeing, he worked with Indra in Spain. He had a very large role in setting up the first international Boeing Research and Technology in Europe, based in Madrid. And right now he's tasked with coring up the existing R&D initiatives in the United Arab Emirates, along with other countries in the region. He's a fellow engineer. He's at heart an aeronautical engineer from Embry-Riddle, and he has a master from Boston University. So, Juan Carlos Campos, thank you so much for being here today. Appreciate your visit. Today's speaker, Dr. William Lyons, is the director of the Global Technology, Boeing Research and Technology. Prior to that, he was the general manager of Boeing Research and Technology from Australia. He actually been with Boeing for quite some time. He's been with Boeing for 17 years, and he has the special internal distinction with Boeing being technical fellow, which is a title bestowed on the company's enterprise expert in aerospace. Prior to that, he worked with the Australia Bureau of Resource Sciences, and he's also held the position of a visiting assistant professor at the University of Oklahoma, so we know that at heart he's also a fellow academic, as well as an exceptional industrial practitioner. Today's talk, entitled Second Century Innovation, Where We Go Next, comes at the anniversary of 100 years on the inception of Boeing itself, founded in 1916. And so, without further ado, I'd like to present to you Engineer William Lyons to the floor. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. I assume you can all hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. My colleagues and I from Boeing, we had the opportunity to see two of the Capstone projects that Boeing sponsors, and they're truly inspirational. What I really appreciated seeing was the energy enthusiasm of you all. And as you kind of work together and solve what are really multidisciplinary challenges, you have to all work together. And I was just really taken with just how much everybody was acting as a team. I think that's really important for aerospace. It's also really important for technology to progress. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. As was mentioned, Boeing was 100 years old last year. So this is our second century. It's the topic of my talk today, to talk about second century innovation. But the history of powered flight is a little over 100 years as well. And so this is really the second century of powered flight. And what does that mean for aerospace? What does that mean in our second century? If you think about what is happening in technology today, particularly not just in aerospace, but generally in technology, it's a more connected world. There's more autonomy, there's more automation, there's more focus on machine learning. It's people working with machines these days. And those technologies, those trends are also going to show up in aerospace. And we see that right now with the competition that is in aerospace with SpaceX, Blue Origin, and Boeing. We, Boeing, think we're going to be the first to Mars, so does SpaceX. And I'm going to talk a little bit why I think we will be the first to Mars today. So a couple of things. Firstly, as I already mentioned, it's fantastic to be here. Boeing is very much a part of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. We have been in the kingdom for almost 80 years today. We are one of the founding members of Alfaisal University. And I have, even though this is my first visit to Alfaisal, my colleagues here in the kingdom have had a long history since the founding of Alfaisal. And again, we're expanding in the Middle East. We're expanding in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. We just heard of the introduction of Juan Carlos Campbell. And we look forward to growing our presence, our technology presence in the kingdom. I don't know if it's possible, but is it possible to get a little bit of light here? I don't want to be kind of talking in the dark. I hope you can see me. Wave up the back if you can actually see me. Ah, perfect. Thank you. All right. So a couple of things. So as I mentioned, we were 100 years old last year. And we celebrated that. We celebrated it for about 5 minutes, and then we moved on. You really have to look forward to the future. While we had to work as a company every day to endure for those 100 years. And that bestowed no right upon Boeing to exist for the next 100 years. The market and the industry holds no allegiances and legacy to companies. You might think otherwise, but there are so many companies that have existed previously. And if you look at the history of Boeing, we're actually the result of a series of strategic mergers and acquisitions over a period of time. And to succeed in our next 100 years, we're going to have to do something different. We're going to have to do something really innovative and really radical if we want to succeed. What we do today is produce, we have three major business units. Commercial airplanes, most people would know about Boeing commercial airplanes. I hope you've flown our products, the Boeing 777 or the 787 in particular. Most people would know that we also have a defense business. Here in the kingdom, we have a business that is based around the F-15 airplane, a very, very capable fighter airplane, and also vertical lift rotorcraft, CH-47 in particular, and Apache helicopters. Apaches are built in Mesa, CH-47 is built in Philadelphia, although as we grow, we're doing more local manufacturing. So that's the second part of our business. We also have a relatively new part of our business, and this kind of speaks to our second century, and it's called Boeing Global Services. That business was actually only stood up on the 1st of July this year. It is really recognizing that much of what goes on in commercial airplanes and our defense business is actually based around services. And you look at the industry already in engines. So Rolls-Royce, GE, Pratt & Whitney are the three major engine producers for both defense and commercial airplanes. And they already have evolved a business model which is called power by the hour. They essentially, the engine is relatively a low-cost item for a or it's a very high value item if you're buying an airplane. But really, over the life of an engine, most of the cost is in the maintenance and upgrades to that engine. So engine manufacturers have evolved to a business model around power by the hour. It's kind of like, to use the analogy, it's when you go buy a printer these days. I made the mistake of buying one company's printer a couple of years ago and discovered that every time I wanted to replace the toner, it cost me about 80% of the purchase price of the printer. And that is the business model around services that you find in computers these days. Expect the same business model to evolve in aerospace. So I can actually foresee the time when airlines, commercial airplane customers, might buy our airplanes as a service, a turnkey solution. And they may not own the airplane. And so our Boeing Global Services business is preparing us for that future. It's taking advantage of the deep knowledge that Boeing has built up over 100 years about airplane manufacturing and maintaining airplanes, whether it's a defense or a commercial product. We are a very capable services provider today. We do provide services to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia today for not just Saudi, but also the defense products that we sell in the Kingdom. And that business is growing very rapidly here in the Kingdom, as it's growing rapidly elsewhere. Surprisingly though, even though we're a very capable services provider, we're only number 2 in services globally. Number 2 in services, and we have a market share of about 8% of the services business in aerospace. Our competitor, number 1, GE, has something like 10% of services. So it's a very fragmented market. And what we're really trying to do is grow our business around data analytics that will enable us to really capture a lot of that services business. So I would say if your career is in data analytics, computer science, machine learning, automation, you've probably got a pretty bright future ahead of you if you wanted to go into aerospace. Today, let me just kind of look back a little bit. What do we actually make as a company? And here's our typical products and service suite. I've talked about a few of those products, 777, 787. We also make quite a range of capable military airplanes. We also, not well known, have a very vibrant space business. Some of our more recent products that most people would know about would be our satellite business. We build very, very capable satellites. These are satellites that are about the size of a school bus, those kind of yellow school buses that you see, and they will work for 20 to 30 years in space. Highly reliable, very, very capable, and we as a business, that's kind of our bread and butter, is around satellite, very large scale satellites. We are, as others are doing, moving into the small satellite business, so CubeSats, small sats. And one of the things that we've done is we've moved to more all-electric propulsion. Ion propulsion is kind of one of our other strengths, which we think will see us forward into the future. But again, before I move off this slide, I've mentioned already our services business, so maintenance support, doing fleet support, kind of turnkey solutions. We have, I'll give you an example of that, this power by the hour that I referred to earlier, is we have a business called GoldCare. And what it essentially does is airlines have outsourced their complete maintenance solution and their fleet management to Boeing. And Norwegian Airlines is an example of that. So the airplanes are probably owned by a leasing company. The flight crew and the flight attendants are probably hired in a services company. And all of the maintenance, spares, are managed directly by Boeing. So if they needed a landing gear for a 737, we would get that for them from somewhere else in the world and bring it to that airplane so that they had essentially uninterrupted service no matter where they are in the world. And that's a great complement to our airplane products, like the 787, which themselves are very capable. So, a couple of things that I want to kind of changing gear. That was more like setting the scene. So what I want to talk about is a little bit about technology development and R&D. And I would say one thing about research and development at Boeing is that it's embedded in just about everything we do. It is robust and widespread. It's ubiquitous. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a moment, about how anyone can innovate and in the Boeing company. But one of the things about how we do R&D is we are very focused on innovation for a business outcome. And that's why it's ubiquitous and embedded wherever you are, because every person at the Boeing company who is innovating, and remember what I said, anybody can innovate, really has to think about the business outcome that they're targeting. And that's why we have our technology development strewn around the company. We do have a central R&D organization, Boeing Research and Technology. Myself, Juan Carlos, Engineer Majid, are part of Boeing Research and Technology. We think there are some benefits to be found by having a central R&D organization. You can feed off each other, for example. You can inspire each other. You can build critical mass in solving tough challenges, which you can't do if you're scattered around in different business units. But at the same time, you really have to have the innovators close to the business product. They really have to be living and breathing and feeling the pain points of the company. And the other thing about our R&D model is, apart from that, is we also have recognized our own limitations. We can't innovate fast enough internally. Every good idea just doesn't come from Boeing. It actually comes from universities like Alfaisal. It comes from partnerships with other technology firms. It comes from government research labs like Capstone, or leading industry groups who are setting standards like the IEEE or the SAE. So one of the other things about technology development is that it has to be highly collaborative and highly focused on working together, so very integrated. Because the challenges that the industry faces are often the challenges that other industries face. So global climate change is a ubiquitous challenge. All industries face that challenge. So we have to work together. And so that is one of the reasons why we have this network of collaborators, people that we have working in corporate R&D, thinking of new ways to make the three businesses more productive. We'd generate about two new inventions. We would generate an enormous amount of data, enormous, 2 terabytes of data. We would do a lot of computational analysis, as you can see. We would perform, our people would perform thousands of hours of R&D. Thousands of hours. And we would also do a lot of work with new material systems. We would also take about $1 million of cost out of the business. And that's a really key point. Every day, we procure about $252 million worth of goods from our suppliers. That's every day, $252 million. And $1 million a day saved is a big difference to our business. And that's one of the things that is driving, as I mentioned earlier, it's driving innovation. And it's also driving what's kind of a perverse element of our success as a company. When we were 100 years old last year, we had about 8 years of backlog in our product line. So that meant that if you wanted to buy a 737 and you showed up today or last year, to go buy one, you would have to wait about 8 years before you could get it. And we're essentially sold out for 737s. We've got some ability to sell 777s. We've got some ability to sell 787s. But essentially we've got this incredible industry-leading backlog of 8 years. It is a backlog of around about 5,800 airplanes that have been sold. So every day I could get up, go to work, and know what I'm going to go do for the next 8 years. What I don't know is how to make sure that those customers get that product cheaper than we promised them to give it to them when they bought the airplane. Because we've built in prices that out 8 years that are essentially the same price as you would pay today. So everybody here who's got an iPhone or a Samsung phone or an LG, you know, every time you buy a new phone, it's pretty capable. It's more capable than the one that you replace it with. So, but it costs about the same. Every time you buy something new, it costs about the same. That's also true in aerospace. You buy a new airplane, it's pretty capable, and it costs about the same as the previous one. So we're selling airplanes 8 years out that have to be even more capable than we tell our customers that they can get today, and they have to pay about the same price for it. So that's the challenge around innovation in aerospace, is delivering that promise of a product today, not knowing how you're going to get there. And so that's, again, this feeds back to that point that I made around innovation is really about trying to find ways to be productive, to get to deliver on new products. And the other point that I would make again is this collaboration. Innovation is a team sport because nobody just has the best idea. Collectively, the ideas are out there that are going to help unlock that value. So that brings to what is innovation. And innovation is essentially what we call creativity with discipline. I saw that today when I was listening to the 2 Capstone projects. It's about being really creative, thinking out new ways to do something, but being very, very disciplined about how you work your way through that creativity. If you just think of a great idea, but you don't think about what are the processes for bringing it to market or for delivering it, then it's art. It's beautiful to look at, but it has no economic value assigned to it. So creativity is really about the creation of economic value and social value and societal value. So you have to think about what is the business outcome of the value you're trying to create. What's the business outcome of the innovation you're trying to produce? So creativity with discipline. It's a balance. It is really a tough balance because all of us can think of really exciting things to do and really innovative things. It's not hard to think of great ideas, but what is hard to do is to think about how to bring it to market, how to bring it to fruition. And that's really tough. You've really got to try not to stifle creativity by being too disciplined, but at the same time, you have to be creative. And so that's the balance that we find in Boeing, is this creativity with discipline. So we have processes. They've stood us very well over the last 100 years. They have helped us get people to the edge of space every day and to the moon 40 plus years ago, and we think they'll help us get people to Mars in the next decade. It's knowing, what are the things that are going to get you there, and working your way in a disciplined way through burning down risks, thinking of all of the possibilities, things that could go wrong. That is really important about creativity with discipline and finding that balance. So we have sometimes there's different ways of getting there in terms of developing innovation. We Boeing have not always done this well, I have to say. We've become, in some cases, over-disciplined, and that stifles the creativity. So we've been addressing that in our second century. So you see this, by the way, in Horizon X and with Apple and with what are companies that are actually going to be competitors to Boeing. And that what they do is they have a very creative group, very much a startup mentality. If you go to any startup, you can probably ask every single person in a startup, what's the value proposition? What's the business outcome that you're looking for? Everybody can articulate that. And one of the things that we need to do as a company, and I'll be candid with you, is try and instill that startup mentality into every employee so that they think every day about the problem they're trying to solve and the value they're trying to create. And that's the challenge around innovation, it's the challenge around aerospace, particularly these days as we've got an aging workforce. One of the, kind of digress for a moment, but aerospace is, particularly in the United States, is very much populated by an aging workforce. Inside Boeing, about half of our engineers are eligible to retire in the next 5 years. So great opportunity for you all, no doubt about it. But what we have to do is take the discipline, take the knowledge of how to do things right, first time, every time, and pass that along to the next generation who has all the great ideas, has every great idea under the sun, all the things we didn't think of, but put that into a context of discipline, thought, building out processes that will actually succeed. Because you can't fail. We can't send somebody to Mars and not get them back safely. And it's really important to have that discipline. So, I said earlier, everyone can innovate. So don't just think of innovation as a technology, your next cool technology. You really have to think of it as not just about product base, but also processes. So innovation in processes. And that's what data analytics and machine learning is really about. It's around improving processes. They can't connect their passengers to all the places they want to go, but if they can team up with other airlines and do code sharing and combine ticketing, so they build in a new business model. That's a way of innovating and making your business more effective. So we try and encourage every Boeing employee, it doesn't matter where you are, to think about innovation in terms of either products, processes, and business model innovation. All of them are equally important. All of them will unlock value. So, let me talk a little bit about the flying part of the products for a moment. One of the things about the innovation expectation of our customers is that every new airplane we deliver has to be more fuel efficient than the previous one. Has to be more fuel efficient. And significantly more fuel efficient. So 20% is about the typical expectation for fuel efficiency. It comes back to that iPhone or Samsung model that I talked about. You buy something new, it costs the same price, but it delivers something better for that same price. And fuel efficiency is what airlines really typically look for. By the way, it's also what our military customers look for. They look for more capability, but they want it to cost them less. They want it to be less to maintain, less to sustain, and they also want it to consume less fuel. So the 777X is going to fly for the first time in 2019. We'll deliver it in 2020. It replaces the 777 models, so the 777-300ER, if you've flown Saudia, they've been acquiring quite a lot of them in recent years. It will be about 20% more fuel efficient than the 777. Let me put that into context, by the way. It would, if the airplane had about 85% of its passengers on board and had, what we call like a nominal load of cargo, because airlines fly a lot of cargo these days. If you were carrying just your typical cargo load, 85% of the seats were taken, you would burn about 2.3 litres of fuel per kilometre, per 100 kilometres per passenger. So think about that, it's a lot of fuel. When you add it all up, it's probably about 72,000 gallons of fuel. But if you take the number of passengers over the distance, it's about 2.3 litres of fuel per passenger per 100 kilometres of travel. So A flight from Riyadh to Los Angeles would be a typical flight where there might be 72,000 gallons of fuel on board. I've got to convert that to litres. Someone can do that faster than me, multiply by 3.65. The end result is about 2.3 litres of fuel per passenger per every 100 kilometres traveled. So that's better than a hybrid. Much, much better than a Toyota Prius, for example. So the expectation is the airplanes just sip fuel these days. Fuel being one of the largest, or the second largest cost of running an airline. All of our products, we're really focused on fuel efficiency. And because that's what our customers are looking for. The other thing that's really important is fuel translates to CO2 emissions reduction. And Boeing and the industry have made very ambitious commitments around fuel efficiency, around CO2 emissions. So we as an industry expect to be 50% of our 2005 emissions by 2050. And just to put that in a context, today aviation is about 2% of global CO2 emissions, which doesn't sound like a lot, but if we did nothing, would grow pretty substantially because ground transport is starting to electrify. There's more battery technology out there. We're already starting to see the death of the internal combustion engine for vehicle transport. Volvo has announced that they are going to have all hybrid. China just announced that there will be no more internal combustion engines in 10 years' time, produced. So we as an industry have to mirror those societal expectations, and hence our focus on CO2 emissions reductions and also noise. Cities are getting larger, more people are flying, and noise, community noise, is a challenge as people move in closer to airports or people move out closer to airports. So making airplanes much quieter is really important as people want to continue to fly. I'm going to stop here and ask a question. Anybody know how many people they think fly every year? I'm going to ask a question to the audience. How many billion people do you think get on an airplane every year? Anyone have a guess? Who says 2? That's close. About 3 billion is the answer. So we've got a global population of 7 billion, and about 3 billion people fly every year. And that's a lot of people flying. That therefore translates to a lot of fuel, a lot of noise, and a lot of CO2 emissions. And it's growing at about 5.5% a year. Incidentally, 3 billion people may fly every year, but I'm trying to remember the number exactly now. Only of today's population, global, of today's 7 billion people, or 7 point something billion people, designing technologies, designing the next generation is really important. And that's just kind of one key part of our business. But I want to circle back to one thing with this slide. I won't spend a lot of time on it. Is every innovation is typically built upon the shoulders of somebody who's gone before. So if you look, I talked about the 787 technologies. They showed up on our 777X airplane. And our 777 technologies, which were leading at the time, 20 years ago, we brought them forward into the 777X. So there's really, it's very rare in aerospace, and it's also very rare in any industry that you see sudden breakthroughs. There's always a place for breakthroughs, or battery technologies, for example, or electric propulsion. But even those kind of breakthroughs are still incremental advances on something that's gone before. So I can tell us Microsoft Word, when it came out in, when did it come out? About 30 years ago. Microsoft Word, leading product 30 years ago, was actually copied from IBM and Xerox technologies. But even those, if you trace it back, it really goes back to Gutenberg's movable type in the 1200s. And every incremental advance kind of leads to the next one. And so one of the things that's really important as you think forward as innovators is, how can I make something better? How can, if somebody produces something, look at it and say, well, how can I make that better? How can I make, you don't have to say, you don't have to tear something down to start again. It's, how can I make it better? Ask yourself, how can I make it better? How can I make it cheaper? How can I make it go faster? How can I make it more environmentally friendly? And so when we move our way forward with the 777X, we've got these new technologies, new ways of delivering laminar flow, new wing tips. We're going to have a folding wing. And that's because we learned a lot from the 787 around composite wings. But we realized if we want to have a bigger airplane, it couldn't fit into a gate. The wings of a 777X aren't going to fit into the traditional gates that you see. And so we needed to have a folding wingtip. And so there's about a 4-meter fold on those wings so that the airplane can come up to a traditional gate. So when you're flying a 777X, if you're near the wing, you look out, you'll see the wingtip fold up and it'll fit into the gate. You think, wow, that's really novel. But Boeing has been building folding wings in fighter jets for at least 50 years that I can recall. So we took one piece of technology, figured out how to make it better, and how to bring it into another product. I won't dwell on this. I'll just say steady progress enables incredible value over time. And so today's airplanes have 90% less CO2 emissions than the ones that came before in the 1960s, and 70% more fuel efficiency. So, sorry, 90% more noise reduction, 70% more fuel efficiency. That's tremendous. But the most incredible thing is, as you heard, I'm originally from Australia. In the 1930s, if you wanted to fly from Australia to London, which a lot of Australians did because of the colonial link, it would take you about 5 days and cost you about 2.5 years worth of salary to go make that journey. In the 1950s, it would take about 3 days and cost you about 4 years of salary. Oh, sorry, 2.5 years of salary. So there was a drop. In the 1980s, you could do it for about 3 months worth of salary, and it would take about 30-something hours. Today, you can make the journey, 777, it's 2 stops, it takes about 19 to 21 hours, depending on which way you fly, and it costs about 2.5 weeks of salary to make the same journey. So we've delivered all this fuel reduction, we've delivered all this CO2 emissions, and we've delivered it at a much reduced price for the passenger. I met somebody in Brazil. We have a research center in Brazil, and I met somebody in Brazil a couple of years ago who told me that he moved from Manaus to Sao Paulo 30 years ago, and it took him 3 weeks in a bus and a ship. He had to sail down the Amazon, then he had to take a bus, and then eventually got to Sao Paulo, and never went back because couldn't afford to go back. And now can fly home from Sao Paulo to Manaus directly on a 737. It takes about 5 hours and costs him the same price as the bus journey cost in those days. So it's not like $35 each way, US dollars. So it's incredible. There's been incredible innovation in aerospace. That is our objective for space. We want to see the situation where going to space is much like you do today, flying around the globe or taking a journey. Today it costs about $35,000 a kilogram to get something to geostationary orbit, and about $14,000 a kilogram to get something to the International Space Station. So when there's a launch, that's what it costs. Elon Musk, through SpaceX, is trying to get that down. We're trying to get it down. Blue Origin is trying to get it down. We envisage a price point of about $200 a kilogram. And when you're at that point, then that really unlocks incredible value in terms of the ability to do chemical production in space, crystal growth in space, so medical, producing drugs in space is so much more effective in low gravity than it is trying to do it on Earth. There is enormous examples of how you can create value through a lower gravity in terms of industrial chemical output. So we think that's one opportunity. And the way to do that, one way to do that is through having renewable space vehicles, reusable space vehicles. And that's why you see the focus of Elon Musk, Virgin Galactic, on having reusable vehicles. I know we're going to run out of time in a minute, so I'm going to say a couple of key words. So very important to be business focused. Work together. When you work together, you start to create value greater than the sum of the parts. So people playing off each other is really important. Discipline is really important. Apply lessons learned. Learn from somebody else. Build on the shoulders of giants. And that will help you unlock value for significantly less cost. A couple of things we need from you all as the next generation is think about, it's great to have technical excellence in your field. You have to be the best. But you also have to have a really strong sense of purpose and values. You have to ask yourself, why? Why am I doing this? And connecting to the bigger picture is really important. In my own story, I grew up in tropical Queensland, Australia, in a sugarcane farm, and was always really interested in the environment because we had a lot of land clearance taking place. I was always really interested in the weather. And that's what led me to Boeing. And so I kind of connect myself to making the world better from an environmental perspective. And that's the technologies that really interest me in Boeing. So have that strong sense of purpose. It's really important to have a global outlook because the ideas come from all over the place. Have that mindset around collaboration. Be able to work in teams. Be able to value diversity of thought. That is one of the most important things that we teach people. Is diversity really matters. So the ideas coming from everywhere is really what is going to create value. And you'll be surprised where all those ideas come from. The world is getting more complex. And so having that curiosity to try to follow complexity is really important. And then again, that last point I make about creativity with this one. Analytical thinking balanced with creativity. So I think I'm out of time. I hope there's a few minutes for questions, which I'd be really happy to take.
Really regretting cutting this short, but we are a bit out of time. There's might be a class coming up, but we do have time for a couple of questions. If you have a question, raise your hand.
Yes?
Yeah.
Two.
Dr. William, thank you for giving us your time and being here. Welcome to Alfaisal. You mentioned our keyword here is innovation, and Elon Musk, he disrupted the industry, whether it was in automobiles or space itself. He's bringing parts back to Earth and rather than throwing it away. And I mean, he's hungry and he's making profits and he's challenging big large manufacturers. What is Boeing doing in that? Is it not hungry anymore? Or is it, bottom line, any business is profit?
Sure. So I'd say a couple of things. Elon Musk is not making any profits. He's burning through a lot of cash. So the difference is we are still profitable, and I think he's on the right track, no doubt about it, with renewable space vehicles. Tesla is an incremental advance, by the way. The battery technology, the powertrain technology is not really that innovative. It's applying it in a novel way, so it's a business model innovation. Boeing is very much interested in the future. So we have a disruptive part of our business called Horizon X, which is to bring in disruptive technology and disrupt Boeing before somebody else does. And you don't see a lot of things that we're doing, but I feel very bullish about where Boeing's going, because our springboard is the legacy that we have has allowed us to solve some challenges. Our challenge is going to be capturing that knowledge and bringing it forward into the next product, which is what it's always the challenge of renewal. Elon Musk is disrupting the space industry now, creating competition, which is great. We need that competition to drive down cost. It makes us better. It makes us bring in ideas and go faster. So he's really helping us more than anything else. There was one question over here, and then I think I got time for one question over there.
Yeah, I'm not going actually after Elon Musk, since you said he's burning cash, which is true. But in the second slide, you mentioned that you're somehow the leader now in the aerospace, but somehow you challenge it from the Europeans by Airbus, and of course from national competitor, which is Lockheed Martin. So Lockheed Martin basically, after you Boeing granted the F-15 and the F-16 programs, the F-32 went to
F-35.
F-35 went to Lockheed Martin.
Yep.
Which is somehow it was a big hit to somehow Boeing. They're still, of course, supplying some of the systems to that program. That's for sure. You're going to make some money. But somehow, do you see that kind of competition that somehow a little bit making things a little bit more difficult to Boeing? Or how you, as being the director, and that R&D, how can you help overcome this kind of challenge?
Sure, good point. So a couple of things. We are in a fierce competition with Airbus. Sometimes they're ahead, sometimes they're behind. Right now they're behind. We've been very focused on not repeating missteps of the past, like the 787, getting new products launched, making them more fuel efficient and effective. And that's been paying dividends for the last several years, where we're winning in the marketplace. Doesn't mean we're complacent. We've got new competitors with Comac, China, and the Russians, Bombardier, as some of you have probably heard about. So I don't see us losing at all. I see us kind of being very focused on products and services that our customers want. Yeah, sometimes we might lose something, like the F-35 campaign, the Joint Strike Fighter, but that was a decade. That was over a decade ago, 2001. We've had enormous advances since then in our products and services, and we shrugged that off. And so it's not something that we're dwelling on. We're moving ahead and making our next generation of products. The thing that we're really focused on at the moment is an autonomous fighter. I think it's going to eat the F-35 for lunch.
All right, good luck with it.
Okay.
So thank you so much. I'll have to have a question. Thank you again. I'd like to ask Mr. President and Mr. Campbell if you can come to the stage. I'd like to pass on a small token of appreciation for today's efforts and continuous support.
I just want to say one thing. If we started a little late, so that's why we ran over. If anybody wants to stay behind and ask me some questions, I'm here for a little while longer. I'm very happy to take questions if you just want to come and talk to us. If you've got a business card, you're interested in an internship, you're interested in the career of Boeing, love to hear from you. Oh, we need a photo. Oh, okay.